Is your knee still not better after weeks and weeks of resting, stretching, and trying to let it settle down? I'm going to share with you today the top 3 reasons why your knee is still hurting. My name is Ed. I run a physio practice in Southwest London, specializing in treating knee pain. And today we're going to dig into why the knee pain that you've got is just not settling down. Now, let's get straight into it. Let's say you've had an injury, maybe you've had a fall, or there's some sort of impact or some sort of trauma that's happened to your knee, and you go through that initial period of recovery, or maybe the knee has just started to hurt for no particular reason, and for some reason it just came on out of nowhere. Maybe you've been doing too much exercise, and you've now got to this point where the knee is easing up a little bit when the rest is helping, but whenever you try to go back to what you like to be able to do, it just flares back up, and then you have to rest again, and then you just get caught in this cycle. Now, this is a story that we hear a lot at Instant Physio, and it's really, really common. And one of the biggest reasons why this kind of thing happens is because we're not preparing the knee for what it needs to do. So let me explain. When you're resting, there's lots of benefits. So we see tissues that are angry in the knee, and tissues that have become sensitized become less sensitized due to the rest, which is good. And swelling and things like that, maybe flexibility comes back. So there are some benefits to resting. But the downside is, if we're not doing anything else, is that the knee muscles that support the knee start to weaken, and that can happen as quickly as 24 hours. So 24 hours of just doing a lot less loading of the knee can result in a lot less strength and a reduction in how much the knee muscles can do, basically. So what that means is, when you go back to your running, or you go back to being able to do your hiking, or whatever it is you like to do, the amount that you used to be able to do and what you can do now has come down by quite a lot because of that muscle weakness. So that's one of the main reasons why this kind of thing happens. We get in this sort of cycle of the pain flaring up when you go back to activity, and then settling down with rest. And what's missing there is rehabilitation. So some strengthening, some balance work, some endurance work, some plyometric work if it's necessary, which is where we're jumping and pivoting and loading the knee in a way which we might do in, for example, running. And that's one of the biggest reasons why this kind of problem can stick around. The second most common reason why this kind of thing happens, where your knee is just not settling down, is because of that return to play or return to activity. So let's take running, for example. Someone does 3 5Ks a week, their knee starts to hurt, they rest, and it starts to settle down, the pain drops, and they're back to a level where they feel happy, and they go back to doing 3 5Ks a week, maybe even at the similar speed that they were doing when they weren't injured. And what this does is exposes the knee to a huge amount of load in a short space of time, and exposes it to something it hasn't been exposed to for a period of time. For example, however long you've been resting for, basically. So we call that is a spike in loading. So we're going from nothing to doing loads, and that's what we call a spike in loading. So that's when the most likely time for an injury to happen is. So for example, in the New York Marathon last year, they tracked self-reported injuries, and the first 4 weeks and the last 4 weeks of the marathon training were the most likely time for people to get injured. And that was because that's when the training and mileage is going up the most. So we have to get the return to activity, the return to play, the return to running perfect, because we don't want to flare things up. So in the clinic, we want to take a really cautious approach. We'll do a mixture of running, walking, and build it up over a period of weeks. And it can feel very, very slow, and it can be quite, requires a lot of patience. But that strategy means we don't risk the knee flaring up, and we don't risk the knee not getting better. The other benefit of doing that is the running that you're doing in small amounts can actually be used as rehabilitation as well. So we actually see some strength gains from doing small amounts of running if you've been resting for a while. Similarly, if you like hiking or walking or any other type of activity, there's benefits to doing that activity in a sort of lesser intense way or lower intensity way, because it exposes your knee to a good amount of stress, and the body and the knee adapt to that stress. The third reason why this kind of problem can stick around is because of an underlying pathology. Now, sometimes we can have a knee injury which requires imaging, requires surgery, and that can be a reason why a knee problem can't get better or doesn't get better. So it doesn't mean that the scan that you have is going to fix the knee problem, but we may find that there's some sort of underlying issue, which is why the knee is not settling down and is really not behaving. So an example would be you may have some sort of meniscal tear, which is so significant that it's actually impacting on the mechanics of the joint and how the knee moves and glides. And no amount of rehabilitation, strengthening, rest is going to help. And actually something like a repair might be more appropriate. So that's just one example. But yeah, there are times when a knee problem does need further intervention, like surgery. It's actually very, very rare that that happens in the clinic. But yeah, if someone's not responding to treatment, then that's the kind of thing that we would be doing next. So I hope you found today useful. If you have any more questions about what I've talked about today, leave it in the questions in the comments box, and check out my most recent video on 3 mistakes to avoid when treating knee pain as well. Looking forward to seeing you again